This is my 3-ring perpetual calendar clock, and it's caused some problems. And we're going to fix that today. Now, this design has been one of my most popular designs. I've sold over 100 copies of the design files on my website, and I've made several of them locally. But there's been one problem. Because of the fact that I primarily sell locally and the fact that this project is too fragile to really ship, I've had a hard time selling as many of these as I'd like to. The price tag for one of these goes from $200 to $250 depending on the type of wood and other options available. And considering that this type of a project has been most popular as a gift, it's a little bit more than a lot of people in my area want to spend. So my solution has automatically started making me money. It's a 2-ring version of that exact same clock. And as soon as I posted it out on my personal Facebook page, I immediately started getting likes, loves, and most importantly, orders. It takes less material, is much faster to build, and can be sold at approximately $100 less, which puts it perfectly within my customer's budget and is a nice complement to the 3-ring version. So if you want to see how to build this, as well as how to position it into your business to increase sales and get you noticed, then stick around. Now, let's head to the workshop. So to begin with, we are going to cut out our rings. I'm not going to go through the details, but I will talk about some of the key parts. Use a 1/4-inch upcut bit to cut my circles. And I use a 60-degree V-bit for all of the numbers and the months. Now ignore that spot in the middle there. I was trying to do some flattening with a flattening bit, and it is seen better days. So I just stopped that and then tossed it. Now make sure you've got plenty of tabs on here because you don't want these coming loose. It will ruin the entire project. So now you'll notice I put plenty of tabs on there to hold that wood in place. Now I'm just going to use a reciprocating saw to cut these out. Cut off as much of that tab as possible so that it's easier to sand down. And I definitely need to replace this blade. It's seen better days. And what do you do with that leftover centerpiece? Guess what? That can just be another clock. From there, let's come over to the spindle sander, clean off those tabs, and then give it a good sanding. Now, my sealant of choice is shellac. It's natural. It's quick drying, actually smells kind of nice. So I'm going to seal it up really well before I go to paint these numbers and months. All right, I'm just using some acrylic paint that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I prefer to paint these in here instead of using spray paint. I've used spray paint in the past. Spray paint tends to be a little thinner, so it's more likely to bleed even if you have a good seal. But I found that with this acrylic paint, that it's going to take a little longer, but the finished product is much better. Hey, if you're interested in making this project on your own, you don't want to design it yourself, I do have the plans on my website. I'll put the links down below. I'll also put the links to the 3-ring version so you can pick up that if you'd like to, as well as a bundle if you'd like to get both of them together. Now, once we let that dry, I'm going to use an 80 grit piece of sandpaper. Now I'm going to use an 80 grit piece of sandpaper to sand off that excess paint, and it's going to take off the majority of that shellac as well. I've toyed around with several ways to do it, and this actually ends up being the best way to do it. Okay, now I want to point out one mistake that I made and something that you'll want to do a better job of than I have. If you notice right here, these numbers are thicker than these numbers right here. The big reason for that is because maybe I didn't do that good of a job of making sure this was flat when I did the glue up, and so there was a slight warp in it. And so these are going to end up being a little bit thicker. So you want to make sure that you have this as flat as possible. Now, it's still going to spin just fine. And what I'll do is I'll just take a little bit of sandpaper and I'll sand this down a little bit thinner, but it is something that you do want to try to prevent that as much as you can. So make sure that your wood is always the same thickness, and then when you glue it up, you use cawls so it's nice and flat and doesn't have any kind of hump in it. All right, now that we have the rings done, let's start making our clock. Now I chose this specific piece of spalted maple for a reason. I love that spalting right there in the center, and that's actually going to be up at the top where you actually see the rings. Forgive the hair that's on my shirt. I've got lots of animals. You know what a glue up looks like, but for the sake of a cool little shot, we'll do a quick little glue up. Hey, now one of these pads fell off. If you see it, pick it up for me, all right? Okay, so we got a piece of spalted maple right here, and I thought this spalting right here would be cool for the top of the clock where you're actually going to see the date and the month stick through right there, and then the engraving, which I'm going to do with my laser engraver, is going to show up down here. So let's screw this thing down and get rolling. All right, now let's cut out our clock. So for this, I'm still using a 60-degree V-bit. Now, I did make one mistake here that I happened to catch in time. You should always do the back side of your clock first because the tabs are on the bottom, and you'll see why that matters here in just a minute. But I'm doing the front side here. Those are the pockets where you'll see the month and day, and now I'm actually cutting the outline. Everything looks fine so far, and everything is fine. But then when I flip it over to do the backside and I cut out the tracks, you'll notice that I actually cut off the portion where my tabs are. So I've actually cut my tabs off, which means that there's going to be nothing holding this down. Thankfully, I catch it at the last minute and I don't ruin the job. Now from here, I did the same thing with painting the letters as I showed you on the rings. I'm not going to show you that again. And just given the style of this engraving that needed to be on here, I decided to use a laser engraver instead. I'm not great with using a laser engraver, so I'm not going to brag about that, but I got the job done. Now from here, these are the top and bottom parts. From previous versions of this project, I've actually added these on here, and they're part of the design files. You'll notice that the top piece actually has a slanted cut there, and that's done because I like to hang this on a wall with a French cleat. That French cleat makes it real easy to just mount anywhere very quickly and easily. Now you want to make sure not to have too much excess glue when you're gluing these two back pieces on there, because if the glue does drip onto the rings, you could actually glue your rings to your clock. From there, let's go ahead and assemble, put our two back pieces in place to frame everything up. And I don't want to move this, so I'm just going to put a couple of kettlebells on top of there, and I'm just going to use pressure to hold these pieces in place and to finish this glue up. Next, we'll add the clock mechanism. I'll put a link to the clock mechanism that I use down in the description if you need to pick some of those up. And finally, let's mount it to the wall. I prefer to use a French cleat, and so I'm just going to mount the cleat back onto the wall right here. And then our clock hangs quick and easy. Okay, so now why is it so important to have both versions in your portfolio? Here's why. The 3-ring version is an attention getter. People love it. But once they see it and they ask the price tag and I have to tell them that it's $200 to $250, that turns a lot of folks off. These are great gift ideas, but they tend to be outside of the price range for a lot of my customers, at least as a gift. But once you've grabbed their attention with a 3-ring version, if they say, it's a little out of my price range, and you can say, well, as a matter of fact, I've got a slightly smaller version. It's only 2 rings, but it's the exact same design for almost half that price. I've found that this version is actually an even better seller locally than the 3-ring version is because it brings a great gift idea within the price range of many of my customers. So the 3-ring version grabs their attention and the 2-ring version oftentimes makes the sale. Well, thanks for watching till the end, because watching till the end and then watching another video, which you're going to see right here, is actually the best way to support this channel. It shows YouTube that the content that I'm creating is engaging and that you want to keep on watching it. So check out this video, which is the 3-ring version that I put out a little while ago, and you can see both of them together.